Audience. Before I start my presentation, uh, I humbly present one of the suggestions that my Guru Parampara has bestowed on me. This is nothing but note to chant Vedas with Swara in front of an unknown audience. So I will preferably, even though there will be quotes within this presentation, I will preferably not spell it out, or even if I am telling, I will be having it without Swara only. I know in front of those great studied Vidwans, it is like, as my Guru used to tell, it's as discomfortable as having stones in between when you chew your rice. So the discomfort, even I myself have felt while I study and while I teach. So, uh, but I request, and I understand the pain the Vidwans have undergone to learn the Vedas, because it's not a easy task. You have to sit ideally squatted on stone floor. So how difficult, and for hours together and repeat. So it's not an easy task. So, and comparing the efforts that they have undergone, the discomfort they undergo to have the comfort of the spiritual, the physical discomfort ultimately is for a spiritual comfort. So never ever they feel the discomfort. At the same time, I have to give due respects to that parampara which has undergone this tremendous efforts and struggle to safeguard the tradition. So keeping that in mind, my humble prostrations in front of those Vidwans to kindly bear with me with that discomfort. And the second part is whatever I am going to put forward as thought are only just what my Guru Parampara has taught me from the scriptures, and are just simple quotations from Veda or Puranas. And very rarely will be there is anything that will be my thought process. And if at all it's my thought process, it is obviously subject to have contradictions and open for any kind of debates. The third part I want to convey is my sincere pranams to Sri Krishnapat Dambadis to kindly accommodate this last minute thought I had, because this is something I had in yesterday. I have another paper that was scheduled, so I requested either give me 10 minutes in this session for the last question and the answer session, or give me a time for a presentation. And they uh, gracefully helped me with this time slot. I am thankful to them. And this thought process again, previous time when I was there for the Ashadara 2013, I remained quiet at times and preferred to be silent when there were a totally different, and I can say it's 180-degree apart thought process that will be presented and maybe discussed. So at that time, it was because of my guru's instructions that why, because just whatever remnant is 5% Satvikada in me, why to waste that in useless debates? Because at times they always bless me like ignorance is a bliss. So remain with that, or allow it to be free. And luckily this time I am charged more than 5%. So I can afford to exhaust my battery to be discharged till the 5%, where my guru will still allow me to go and sit on his feet. So keeping that in mind, I have decided to come up with this Rajasigada that will allow me to exhaust my Satvikada to a greater extent. So, and the last part is my sincere thanks to Srivatsa, because I will come back on one of those slides where we have something called as a subjective part of analysis, and it is out of scope of this paper. However, yesterday night from 10 o'clock till 12, we sat to just gather some information from a very great book called as Vedartha Parijada. I had only the first volume, he had the second volume, so he helped me with scanning it, sending it to me, and helping me out to just get myself prepared. As I say, it's out of scope. So, and nowhere in this presentation it will be referred to, or anything that is available in those pages that we refer to is not at all there in this presentation. and it is out of scope purely. At the same time, I am very much open because the only reason is because it takes more than 30 minutes to discuss on it, and we don't have time. So I am very much open. I will be available off stage. People who want to discuss on that can necessarily come back. So with this, let me start. First is, as I have told, it is about women and Veda Adhyayana. The first part is why Brahmana should learn Veda. Before we get into the topic of whether women should learn or not, first is why Brahmana should learn Veda. And it's very well discussed. Yesterday also we discussed the Mahabhashya. Patanjali clearly mentions Brahmanena Nishkarano Dharma Shadango Vedo Adhyeyaha Kneyaha. So it is Nishkarana. There is no question to be asked. There is no Karana to be ascertained. So that is, and as we see, it's for a Brahmana. So the point of scope of our thought is for something else. So we will come to that. And but first we have to understand, as I say, I have to always represent what scripture tells. So this is what scripture is telling. And it's very clear the masculine gender, Brahmanena, is used, and there is no feminine gender used anywhere. So keeping in that in mind, this is very masculine, so it clearly has specific indications. We will come back to that later. Now the question or the topic, why women want to learn Veda? And our scope, is it, if at all women want to learn Veda, is it the end-to-end Adhyayana, that is the whole Samhita at least, or Samhita Brahmana as we have seen, the Dasha Granthas? Is it for the Dasha Grantha Adhyayana, or only is it, the scope has to be very well defined, and we have to understand, as I say, the scope. The second point which we have seen is Veda is clearly not learning just Rudram or Purusha Sukta or a couple of suktas which hardly consist 2% of the whole Veda. So, and that is the learning to chant them is not Veda, or it doesn't help to preserve Veda. And as I have put down, these confusions comes because of the Neo-Vedanta and Neo-Tantrics. So even though in the Agama way of worship, Vedic suktas are used, we have degraded ourselves Veda to such a level that only 2% of what is used in temples is what is Veda Dhyayana. That is not the case. So if we say Veda Dhyayana, the word or the term clearly indicates end-to-end Adhyayana of the Veda. So is that the scope? That should be very well defined before we discuss on to it. And my point here, or what I am going to cover, as I say, there may be different viewpoints, but ultimately when we say Veda Adhyayana, it should be end-to-end Adhyayana. That is what the Sabda indicates, or that should be the scope. And as I have told, it has its own difficulties and fun attached with it. The next question is, within the scope, why are we going to learn, why women want to learn Veda? Is it to pay respect to Veda or to question it? So it could be either way, that is fine. Obviously, you are either coming with a mind of inquisitiveness to question it, or with an approach that you want to respect it because it's the Nishvasiddha of Paramatma. So either way, irrespective in the scope, when somebody wants to learn it, they have some aim or goal in their mind, and they have to ensure it covers end-to-end Adhyayana, because learning it part, it's not going to take you anywhere. You are going to get lost. And the confusions, as I have told, it has come mainly due to these Neo-Vedantins and Neo-Tantrics, and they have clearly forgotten the question of duty and rights, because I will be covering this part, duty and rights, and again, dharma and adhigara. So when we go for an adhigara, whether first are we following the swadharma, after you do, the adhigara is bestowed on you only if you follow your swadharma. You just fight for your right of adhigara without following a duty. The right will come through duty. So the next slide I will start on that. The third slide will cover about that part. And before, as in the first slide, we defined the scope. In the second slide, we should see what should be the outcome, because when somebody is going to do something, there is a purpose. As I have initially told, for Brahmana, there is no purpose, but others, obviously, there is an outcome. And in this case, when a woman wants to learn it, there should be a clear outcome, and the outcome, because the Veda is used in Yajna and Karma, the outcome should be used as Adhyayana to perform in a Yajna or Karma, or use it for Jnana Sampadana, because these are the two paths Veda clearly envisages, the Karma Ganda and Jnana Ganda. So you have to use it either in the Karma Ganda or use it in the Jnana Ganda. And we will see whether Veda, the Adhikara or the other part, but irrespective, somebody who wants to learn, especially the Brahmana, when he is going to learn it, he has to use it for either of these or both. So ultimately, it has to be used for the Karma Ganda or Jnana Ganda only, because Veda simply tells only these two Kandas. It is comprising very clearly of Karma Ganda and Jnana Ganda, and when one wants to approach it, they have to be very clear they are going to use it for these two purposes. And as the third point that I want to observe, as I have told, the scriptures of Advaita Guru Parampara clearly forbids, it's not just Advaita, but the earlier thought process of whether it is Ramanuja or Madhva, very clearly they forbids Vedanta to be learnt only after completing the Purna Adhyayana. And there is a clear Adhikari definition. There are Abha Shudra Adhikaranas, or there are Adhikaranas which very clearly defines where there are certain Adhikaras. But the Adhikara, as we see, and what does it mean again, and what is Vedanta, we have to be very clear, because Vedanta is all about the Anda part of Veda, the Upanishads, and its discussion. It's a darshana among the Shabdarshana, and discusses mainly about the thought process that has happened in a structured manner within Veda. So without learning Veda, you try to meddle up with Vedanta, you are going to be nowhere. And that's what Vedanta itself clearly tells. And this part, the Ada Shabda is clearly refuted by Shankara. He starts with Ada and he tells Ada has two meanings, going forward or now onwards. So, and he tells it is after something. There is a reason why he claims that Ada means only after something, and after what? Is it after learning the Jnana Ganda or Veda? And he clearly substantiates his point that Veda, after completing the learning of Veda only, you can go ahead with Brahma Jignasa. So that's what he starts with the Adha Shabda, the first Shabda of the Sutra itself. This is available in Shankara Bhashya. And let us go to the next step. This paper presents the subject into two level of approach. One is an objective approach and a subjective approach, and as I have already told, subjective is out of scope. I am going to take only the level 1 objective, and I will tell you why subjective is not in scope for this current, as I have told, of the time constraint. In case of objective, we have to leave aside our self-association with gender, varna, and anything that is there that gets associated, we have to be neutral. We have to come with that mindset and then take up the subject. And here the subject, which is Veda, remained as unchanged pramana when we go for this objective approach, because here we are shedding away all our preconceptions and notions and approach it neutrally. In the subjective, the debate is about what is sanctioned in Veda, and whether it, and again after learning the Vedas and Shadangas, what is the debate that we can do on what is told on Veda. So here we have to obviously cut apart, tear apart the Veda and discuss. So that is a very intellectual level which I have, that's the reason why I told it, at least for minimal it takes 30 minutes to start with it. So I am not going to discuss on that at all. And we will limit to level 1, the next slide. So as I have told, rights and duties, as we all know in political science or anything, we have fundamental, as Indian citizens, we have fundamental duties which bestows on us the fundamental rights. And obviously when we come with approaching Adhyayana from the point of equality, equality is obviously a question of your right, because you are going, when you are telling something equality, you are going to fight or discuss on your right on something, and you are identifying how much fraction or division of that right you are going to earn. And in this case, it's clearly all about rights. And that quantum of right is fully fixed. And I will just take a practical scenario, because why I am telling this quantum of right is fixed. You will, I will take an example of what happens generally in family. Because when a woman in their younger age, when they get married, when they fight for their right as a wife against the right of the mother, who is the mother-in-law, and try to gain, assume if you gain a major share of your right, the quantum, major quantum is already utilized in your earlier age. Now when you become old, and when you have to execute the other part of your right, the right as the mother, you will clearly, the natural law clearly see that since you have exhausted the major quantum in your earlier stage, you are obviously left out with a lesser quantum of your right in your later stage. So even if you fight for your equality, clearly there will be in practice inequality only that will going to come. And it's the same with our freedom, our fundamental right. As I told, you have a fundamental right to cross the road. You have a fundamental right to be free, freedom to walk. However, that doesn't mean you can cross the road when there is a huge traffic just because you are free to walk anywhere in the country. So there is a clear maturity that is necessary when you execute your right, because there are certain duties that you have to follow. So my next slide will talk about this duty, because we have to be accountable with anything, and with big power comes the bigger responsibility. So duty, we have to first understand what is the duties that we have to perform, because this entitles you or bestows you the right that you are going to earn. And without understanding or performing that duty, if we are going to claim our rights, obviously, as I told, there is going to be a disproportion and it is going to be unequal or an imbalance. And as I have mentioned, that we are entitled for our right only when we perform our duty. So it is a prerequisite. And what Vedas teach us duty for a woman is the role of a Dharmapatni. So this is something that I have presented in my earlier paper also, this quotation from Taittiriya Samhita. This comes where the Patni as a Mithuna of the Yajna helps out to complete the yajna, because anavachitti, or the the continuity of the yajna is attained only when Patni as a Miduna performs along with the Yajamana. So that is the first and foremost fundamental right which Veda bestows on the women. And this mantra comes more than more than once in the Taittiriya Samhita itself, the same part in two different occasions. Also, there are specific acts that are very well bestowed as a role that has been performed. And as I say, here the Strilinga is very clearly used in the Veda. So it clearly indicates the Patni, and it has a clear meaning, and there is a right and a duty that you have allowed. Apart from the Shrauda Yajnas, we have the Smarta Yajna also, for which obviously the purpose of the marriage itself is to enable you to perform the Smarta Yajna, for which the Paga Yajna, it starts with the Sapta Paga Yajna, the basics of which the Stali Bhaga and Uavasana are, and ideally the marriage day itself, it starts, the Stali Bhaga starts. So the Stali Bhaga, which is done on every Parva, and the Upasana, which has to be done daily, is a right that is being bestowed on the Dharma Patni. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, and about Avasana, and we have to, as I have told, we have to see the scriptural references. Where does it come? I will cover both Vedic and Puranic references to this story. There was a story that starts with Abhova. This is in line with our Puranic story of the Varaha, how and as we call Yajna many times, because here the story tells it was Salila only, or in liquid form. Even the modern science tells that, because from sun or whatever, when the earth got moved away from a bigger hot mass, it was in the liquid form. It had to get cooled down to have our life to start. So that's what it tells. It was fully Salila, and in that Prajapati became Vayu to cool down the Salila and make it solid. He became Vishwakarma Bhutva. He has became Vishwakarma, and he just made it flat enough so that it is solid. He made it solid, and in that solid, what he did was, he asramyat. So he has done a tabas to create. So the creation started out of his tabas only. This tabas is important. I will cover that part in the next slide as well. So, and after tabas only he was able to create devas. The moment he created devas, they asked, we also want to procreate, prajayamaha. So he told, how I have created you is only through tabas. So you also do the tabas. And for this only he has told, Tebyo Agni Mayadanam Prayachat. So it is the Ayadana Agni. In house, the Agni is stored as the protector of the house, as the Garhabati Agni. So he gave the Agni to them and told, use this for your tabas. With this only you will be able to procreate. And they did it, and the story goes further. So I will stop it here. And this clearly indicates the story, and this is in fact referred in Baudhayana Grihya Sutra as well as Patni's Samskara. Next slide. Yeah. Before coming to this slide, I will, as I have told in the previous slide, there is something called as a part of yajna. And there is something that has a reference from Purana also. The Tulakaveri Mahatmya incidentally mentions about the importance of Uavasana in chapter 19. And there it is very clearly told that performing this Grihya ritual is very much mandatory. Even if somebody is performing, is rather inert or not interested in other karmas, this is a mandatory karma which should not be left aside. And why is it tabas? As we have seen, the Vedas tell it as tabas. Does it comes in Smriti also? Yes, of course, because Bhagavad Gita very clearly tells in the 6th chapter, the starting itself, Bhagavan tells, Anashrita karma phalam, karyam karma karodiyaha, sa sannyasi cha yogi cha, ninilagnir nacha kriyaha. And Shankaracharya clearly explains in its Bhashya, because this is something that gets mutilated at times. The Shankara Bhashya is very clear, and there is a purpose also why, even though he doesn't explain the purpose of the Bhashya, because there were no previous Bhashyagaras who has mutilated it. Only the modern Bhagavad Gita Bhashyagaras comments it in a very yogic way. And it's a real difficult situation to explain it, because there is no substantial evidence that they can mutilate that sloka, because I will just start with the Anvaya and come back to that discussion necessarily. So, na niragnihi na cha akriyaha san yaha karyam karma karodi sa sannyasi cha yogi cha bhavati. This is what is the Anvaya for it. And assume if we were doing the other way around, as some of the modern Bhashyas, I cannot say it's Bhashya because it's maybe in other languages as well, but the so-called modern yogis sometimes mutilate it in the other way, where they say a sannyasi or yogi is niragni and na niragni and na akriya, because, but the problem comes in the next statement, because you have to still join it with the next part. Karyam karma karodi. So what is the karya karma for a sannyasi? Sannyasi doesn't have any karma. He has sannyasa. The praisha, when he fails, he has to get rid of everything. So there is no karya karma for him. And that is the very reason why Shankara didn't have to refute it or change the Bhashya at any point of time. Only unfortunate situation is post Shankara, there are many neo Vedantins who have mutilated it in the name of yoga. And again, it's a, as I say, it adds to a lot of our own ignorance, because there is no karya karma for the sannyasi there. So here there is a very interesting point which Shankara wants to make, because here the grihastha is getting proclaimed or being given the status of a sannyasi and a yogi if and only if he performs it with anashrita karma phalam. Karma phala anashritya yaha karyam karma karodi. Because the point is in the karyam karma, because there is something that is bestowed or inscribed, or scripture has, there is an injunction from scripture that this has to be performed. That is a karya karma. So that if somebody is performing, there is lot of tabas required. And that's what in later chapter Bhagavan clearly mentions, Eknadana tabak karma natyajyam karyam evatat. Eknam danam tabasyeva pavanani manishina. So he clearly tells the ekna, dana, tabak, karma, all the three should not be tyajya. All the three has to be done. And the very symbol, this Devekna or Uavasana itself includes all the three, because if we start practically doing it, it's a lot of tabas. The heat, the taba that is required and the difficulties you have to face is tremendous at times, the starting time. But later it is very comfortable because you have to obviously sacrifice. The sacrifice part easily comes because you have to sacrifice some of your comfort. But later on this discomfort is going to get added as your comfort. And the dana part obviously comes there because here you are going to sacrifice not just your comfort, you have to do specific ahutis to the Agni, giving it back to the environment. And it is itself a yajna. So yajna already is answered there. So all the three comes within this part. And that is the reason why this is a mandated karma within Veda and Vedangas. Now, this expert, I will read it out as it is because this is from the Voice of God the book Voice of God by Puja Sri Chandrasekharendra Saraswati Swamigal. He has told, Avasana is the only Vedic rite that a woman is entitled to perform on her own. Of course, and this statement has a injunction because except for Avastambins, because for Avastamba Sutra alone, Nastri, there is an injunction where Stri is not allowed. But all the other Grihya Sutras allow Stri to perform there. So, but at the same time, Abhastamba has rules where the Stri is mandate there, like her role and her Anyukna, the Hoshyami for which there is a Pradiprasna called as Jihodi is mandatory. So, only with the consent they can perform this. And of course, there are so many Puranic Vradas and Pujas that she can perform according to the Shastras. But these belong to a different category. Besides, she has naturally a state in all the worlds of her husband. Apart from, naturally has a share in all the works of her husband. Apart from caring of household, she does not have to perform any rite other than Avasana. That is the beauty of the duty here, because she has many other duties. There is only one duty that is being forced upon. Even if she does, it will not yield any fruit. For such is the rule according to the Vedic Dharma Shastras. This is the words of Puja Sri Shankaracharya, so it's not my word as I have reading it out. And we hear people talk of rights. It's my wish to create an awareness among women about their right, the right for Avasana. I should like every home to be bright with sacred Avasana fire. Women should fight for this right of theirs and impress upon their husbands the importance of performing Avasana. Even though you have given up all scriptural karma, they have to tell like this. That's what Swamiji is giving the advice. Even though you have given up all spiritual karma, scriptural karma, you should at least do you at least do the Gayatri Japa to retain your connection with the Vedic Dharma. If you do not do this japa, even forget the mantra, one day you will feel repentant over thinking of the Upanayana and samskara you had. Women should tell their husband. As for me, I have had no Upanayana, nor I am entitled to mutter the Gayatri. If at all I have the right, according to the Vedas, which are the source not only for our religion but for this world and of creation itself, it is the Uavasana. If you refuse to perform it, it will be denying my Vedic right. In this manner, women must fight for this sacred right of theirs and make their husband perform Uavasana. Uavasana is indeed the one great Vedic property. This is the words of, I just conclude the words of Puja Sri Chandrasekharendra Saraswati Swamigal. And this is from the Viveka Chudamani Bhashya of Puja Sri Chandrasekhara Bharati Swamigal of Dakshinamnaya Pida. He has told in the Bhashya, the second page, because it's the Ubodgada part, and he refers to a sloka later, but there he doesn't come back to this Ubodgada where he has already covered this. So, Tadap Pumstam Striyaha Vede Adhigara Abhavat. So, he very clearly concludes there that there is a abhava that is mentioned, and pumstva is necessary to learn the Vedanta part, and it's again just Vedanta. So I am not getting into all those, as I have told, it's all subjective matter. We can obviously calmly discuss when we have time. To conclude, let us humbly start with the fundamental duty bestowed on women by Vedas and then look into the issues, if at all any, with the rights and equality. Because as I have told, once we perform our duty, we are entitled for our rights. Let us fight for the rights, but let us first start with our duty. Without doing duty, if we fight for right, we are going to go nowhere. It is going to create imbalance only. And with the Bhagavad Gita quoting, Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunaha Paradharmat Swanishtidar. Swadharme Nidhanam Shreyaha Paradharmo Bhayavaha. Because when we perform, even if it is Viguna, if we are performing and staying within our Swadharma, that is much better. It is Shreyan. Rather than getting into something, an unknown territory, thinking that that is going to be best. With this, let me conclude my topic.
So after that,
it is actually Karyam Karma, not Karya Karma. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, sorry.
what my doubt is very much related to that, take this my doubt. Pertaining to sannyasi's duties, the duty itself is a big word to be defined.
Yes, as a dharma. Again, duty as a dharma.
Then sannyasa, in sannyasa ashrama, there are certain things to be performed, including ablution, etc., etc. So, can I ask whether a sannyasi need not attain, need not attain anything? Because any karma we do to attain something, some goal, some target. So here, can we say a statement that a sannyasi need not attain anything, because everything, where particular stage where everything is nishkama, nishkama karma. So can you think in those lines?
Yes, obviously I will. Yeah, yeah, sure. Obviously I will answer this. As you see, there are two stages of this sannyasa again. It's the Turiya ashrama, as we say. And this is the only ashrama which is allowed for Atyashrama. Because you can cross the other ashramas. Only this stage is allowed as a Atyashrami, where a Brahmachari is also entitled to go into a sannyasa, whereas other things there is a krama. So there are, again, you can either go through the krama ashramas or become an Atyashrami. And only in the Shankaracharya Sampradaya, this Atyashrama is followed in general. So other Sampradayas allows the krama or the proper path. And again, with respect to the duties, the Shastra and Veda clearly tells, when we look at Upanishad, there is no karma that is entitled for a sannyasi. That's why there is no karyam karma. And that is across, even Shankara himself across describes it in detail that there is no karya karma. However, in current stage, when we see somebody is a madadipati, he is performing the roles of some, this ablutions or anything is mandated only for a madadipati. Because within sannyasa they have the 10 stages, or the Dasha Namni Sampradaya came post the Shankaracharya period, and he created the Dashanamni Sampradaya. So in Dashanamni each have different specific rights. However, this is not that is accepted within the Veda. This has come as a convenience for people in the later. And even now the Naga sannyasis, so there are people who are Avadudas. Again, the real Avaduda sannyasi or a Jivan Mukta at their stage forgets. And we had classical, even Madhadipadis, there were classical examples. I can even quote Pujya Sri Chandrasekhara Bharati Swamigal, who was in his Andarmugavastha where he didn't perform any karma. People used to have, including the government, because it was under the Mysore government and the British government during that time. They were also concerned at times, but he was in a real Andarmuga stage where he didn't. At that stage, he was not, and that is one of the reasons why he preferred not to get into the administrative hassle. So he inducted another Uttaradhikari and he bestowed all the, which was not in line with the samskar. So we can see the examples, but, and that example itself is a classical example of the real sannyasa. So we were fortunate enough to see such a, I am unfortunately not fortunate to see him, but necessarily I am in his parampara, so I can at least tell the Guru has really shown us a path there to show why akarma is there for a sannyasi.